so the notice of withdrawal would have to be modified to reflect withdrawal of parcels that are entirely out of the conservation easement. Whereas now, it uses the description for the conservation easement to say, you know, this is going to stay in, this is going to go out. And that's my interpretation of the
Could I help explain a little bit, because this really is a unique situation, if you don't mind, I use the map here. We did, there are two kind of interconnected conservation easements at Smoke Creek Ranch in late 2011. That's what first triggered this non-renewal. Everything on the California side, well, everything on the Nevada side too, was in the conservation easement, with the exception of a roughly 5-acre barn site on this 600-acre parcel along Rush Creek, and somewhere 10, 20 acres right near Smoke Creek Reservoir. So over 90% of that property is in conservation easement. If you do this concept of, you know, taking out a Williamson, what's in the easement, we just like you to take all that out so we can, you know, do some barn improvements and things like that. It's not a type of situation where it's half parcel in, half out. Now, late in 2012, we recorded a second conservation up at Shin Ranch, which was very similar. It included all of, I think there are about 6 or 7 different parcels associated with Shin Ranch. But again, there were 2 barn sites withdrawn, not included in the easement. I think they total somewhere under 10 acres out of about 1,000, so a very small portion. If you're going to take, you know, that conservation easement out of the contract, you know, please take the whole parcels. The rest of these parcels up to the north, Post Camp Ranch, Shearing Corral, Big Spring, Alshin Ranch, those are not under conservation easement, so those hopefully at least would stay in Williamson Act. So doing this splitting would certainly take a lot of the sting off of the non-renewal because most of our properties are not in conservation easement. It would go from whatever it is, more than double any of our taxes to a 50% increase or something like that. And, you know, that's what we have, but
okay, thank you. All right.
I have a question. How big are the parcels that you want to keep in the Williamson action? They're not contiguous, obviously.
Well, I haven't tabulated it up, but it totals, I guess, roughly 4,000 acres.
And are not part of a conservation easement.
Right.
Correct. The conservation easements total somewhere around 3,000 acres, and somewhere around 4,000 acres are not under easement. Although in due fairness, we are in discussions to potentially do conservation easements there. We're in trouble finding other good economic returns in that land.
I have a question of Gary. So, as you stated, one of the actions that we could take as the applicant is request that we take is a little different than what's in our packet, but basically the action would be to non-renew any of the lands that are attached to a conservation easement.
Partial, fully or partially?
Fully.
Fully.
And then to go ahead and grant the protest, or keep all of the other parcels in the Williamson.
If you'd like, I'd be willing, I can help maybe shape a motion that,
exactly.
that one, you know, can do.
Wouldn't it be more prudent for us just to go ahead and do what we've normally done, contract-wise, as far as to grant, except for the conservation easement? And then the applicant, he can come into you with his verification of who he is and whatnot, then you guys can go in and carve out what he wants left out, what he wants put back in?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be that easy. For one, because we're dealing with a partial non-renewal. The board was acting on the entire contract, the entire individual unique ownership, and saying, you know, it's non-renewed pursuant to our policies. The owner protested, and the government code says you can then do a partial. You have some ability, if the applicant's wanting to do that, the landowner's wanting to do that, you can do a partial. That's what we're playing with now, is that mechanism to do a partial. The landowner can propose, you know, partial withdrawal. It takes board action, and there's, you know, requirements of that as well. But it could be contemplated though.
So they could come back later and say, I'd like to square you drew there, I'd like to put this in the Williamson Act that has nothing to do with the conservation easement. Because right now, they're requesting we take that whole block out, we non-renew the whole block instead of splitting it.
Mhm.
Yeah, so just, but if you can, just summarize the action the board would have to take that isn't right now stated in our board.
Well, if the Board of Supervisors, you know, of course, one of the proposals of the applicant was to withdraw the notice entirely, which
Right.
runs contrary to our policies and
Yeah.
procedures, so that may not be a viable option for the board.
Right.
The other thing that they presented was, instead of splitting an assessor's parcel, not a legal parcel, but an assessor's parcel in terms of in and out of the program, that if the conservation easement affected part of the parcel, you know, keep the non-renewal effective for the whole thing. So the notice of partial withdrawal of notice of non-renewal would be for parcels that are not affected whatsoever by a conservation easement. And I could help with that, framing that, and maybe finding too, if that's the direction you want to go.
Yeah, okay, so just state if that was an option you wanted to do, what would that particular motion read?
I don't know, give me a second.
So as a item, how many choices are you
Well,
said there are A, B, C,
the
D?
choices, you know, for the board are to, they could proceed, conceivably
No,
grant the
sorry, I
appeal.
understand.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was saying, so this is gonna be a new choice that's
Yeah.
not in here, so just state exactly what the new
Well,
choice would
the, you know, new choice would be to grant the applicant's request and record a partial notice of record a partial notice of withdrawal of notice of non-renewal for parcels that are not affected in any way by the conservation easement. By APN number, and that would be by APN number. And then also, I would propose, you know, I would look at, maybe council may have some information as to whether it can be, you know, we haven't verified, we have no independent verification of the landowner, so I would want to kind of condition that on.
In his letter, he's identifying the APN numbers of the parcels that are not affected by the conservation easement, and so either partially or wholly. And so that would be, to start, now obviously he has to be vetted to make sure that, you know, that's correct. But these are the parcels in which the Williamson contract is affected by conservation easement. So those would be the ones that would be non-renewed. These are the ones that would be removed from being non-renewed.
You can
This
also,
is part of, this is
Yeah.
the page 2 of
Okay.
Mr. Stockham's,
Under if you decline, under that paragraph. If you
yeah,
decline to withdraw.
right, where it starts about, he would like us to just, you know, do everything and leave it as it is, and that's what that paragraph starts off, and if we don't do that, he's saying, at least give me back in the Williamson Act these APNs because they're not affected by the conservation easement. And I think that's the motion that you're looking for.
Right.
And to be honest with you, that's the one that I would be interested in supporting.
Yeah.
Hey, good morning, Anderson. And I think we understand your motion, but I think it might be prudent to table this till next meeting so that we can verify all these APNs.
And coming with a specific resolution to do just that.
And verify, you know, the Estelles aren't here and I'm sure he has the authority to speak on their behalf, but we'd like to just kind of get that on the books too as well.
Do you
So-
have power of
This isn't
attorney?
just Dell's, first of all. Yeah, if I could speak, you know, I'd be happy to, I'm the manager there, so the owners, it's not the Estelle family, it's several families, Jackson and Douglas family. And I work with them in the office, so they can send
That's
send
fine, but
verification.
in the absence
If
of
there's
that
a way
information.
you can condition verifying that these are the accurate parcels and that I'm allowed to speak, I'd really appreciate not having to take another day to come up to another meeting. But if we need to do it again.
Well,
you know,
if
we'll do
this
it.
is the direction we're going, I think you've given enough testimony, your presence here, because it'd be a matter of them bringing back a clean document that specifically, which you'd have a copy in advance, and we could, you know, take care of it as routine business.
Yeah, you wouldn't necessarily have to come, we're pretty much, our continue to support your option two, if you will. Option one is to leave it alone, but your option two is to, you know, keep
Yeah.
those others, so. we're-
And that's because of the amount of acreage involved. If you were dealing with just a, you know, a couple hundred acres that would be excluded, it probably wouldn't be worthwhile. But if you're talking about 4,000 roughly out of 7,000, I'd say that is significantly leave it
Yeah.
alone.
So we just need to clean up the paperwork, if you will, to go to, and then vote it in once the paperwork is tidied up.
Well, thank you very much for, partly.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so is that the direction of the board? We're gonna tidy up the paperwork to
So,
go online.
just to re-articulate, so you're gonna direct staff to come back with an action to non-renew the parcels, the assessor's parcels that contain the conservation easements.
And notice of withdrawal of non-renewal to the parcels that aren't affected by the conservation easement.
The non-renew's already happened.
Right,
So
so
that's in past tense. It's the withdrawal that is the action.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also with verification of, the condition of representation of course taken.
Okay, well, thank you, yeah. I think,
For next week.
thanks, appreciate you coming.
Is that-
Can we get it for next week? Because we want it to.
Yeah, it will be really easy to do.
Okay, I'll get it.
So,
I like this.
Agenda meeting.
Go enjoy one of the nice restaurants there in town, leave some of your money here on the way. Thank you, thanks. Okay, so let's have our 10:25 recess a little bit, not for the fact.